fixed idea. And this guy's got one fixed idea. He's committed a murder, and he's being interrogated in his padded cell. Of course, you can imagine what a padded cell was like in the late 1800s. So he's being interrogated about the murder that he has performed. Yes, sir?
Okay.
Nervous. Yes, very, very dreadfully nervous. But why would you say that I am mad? The disease sharpened the senses, not dulled, not destroyed them. Above all was a sense of hearing most acute. I heard many things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how calmly, how healthfully I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say when the idea first entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me, never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a thin film over it, and whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I decided to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the evil eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. With what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it gently. Oh, so gently. Then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. You would have laughed to have seen how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved very, very slowly, so as not to disturb the old man. It took me an hour to place my whole head so far within the door that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have acted as wisely as this? And then, when I had my head well in the room, I opened the dark lantern cautiously. For the hinge creaked. I opened it just so much that one thin ray shot from out that lamp and full upon the evil eye. And this I did for 7 straight nights. Every night, just at midnight. But the eye was always closed, and so I could not do the work, for it was not the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, I walked boldly into his chamber, spoke courageously to him, calling him by name and inquiring in hearty tones how he had spent the night. For you see, it would have been a very, very profound old man indeed to have suspected that every night I looked in upon him as he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was even more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before had I felt the full extent of my powers, of my sagacity. I could barely contain my feelings of triumph to think there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to suspect of my secret deeds and thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and he moved upon the bed. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His chamber was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters had been close fastened through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on, steadily, steadily. I had my head well in the room, was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon its tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in that time I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in bed, just as I have, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the walls. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. Oh, it was not the groan of pain nor grief. Oh, no. It was that stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night, when the rest of the world slept, it has welled up in my own bosom, deepening in its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lamp, and so I opened it. You can imagine how stealthily, until at last one thin ray shot like the thread of a spider and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious at the sight of it. And now there came to my ears a dull, quick sound. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It enraged me like the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier to courage. So this sound excited me to uncontrollable terror. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy iron bed on top of him. For some moments, I bore down with my fingers upon his throat. At length, the beating ceased. The old man was dead. His vulture eye would trouble me no longer. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe for you the wise precautions I took in the concealment of the body. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I pulled up some boards from the floor and deposited all between the scantlings. I replaced the planks so cleverly, so cunningly, no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A wooden tub had caught all. When I had made an end to these labors, it was nearly 4 o'clock, just as black as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to answer it, for what had I to fear? In there stepped 3 men who introduced themselves as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor in the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police offices, and these men had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek I had said had been mine own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. At length, I led them into his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. At length, in the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs in and desired that they should rest from their fatigues, while I, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own chair upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of my victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. The sound increased. It grew louder. Still louder, but the sound steadily increased. I spoke more fluently and in a heightened tone, but the sound grew louder. I arose and argued trifles in a high voice and with violent gesticulation, but the sound grew louder. I cursed, I raved, I swore, but the sound grew louder, louder, louder. Was it possible they heard? No, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my terror. I could bear their hypocritical smiles no longer. Villains, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the floorboards. Here it is, the beating of his hideous heart. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well done.